Thanks, Brian. I want to cover two things today. First, I want to show you why using an in-market team is a good option to give serious consideration to. And secondly, I want to show you three programs that we have to help bring firms into North America. Now, first, this is a slide similar to one you saw in the last webinar that shows two classic options that companies use in going abroad. Hiring sales reps directly and managing them remotely, or sending a trusted insider. Hiring a sales rep is fine as long as the first hire is a good and effective hire. A problem often results in hiring someone you think is going to work out only to find 6 or 9 months later that they're not working out. You've got to replace them. You've got to find a new person. You've got to get them on board, get them trained. You lose traction, you lose time, and you wind up behind the eight ball. And there's no guarantee that second person is going to necessarily work out. And sometimes, as luck would have it, you find a great person, but because it's your first person and you're still scratching the surface, figuring out how you're going to support them and be successful in the country, they may get frustrated and leave after 6, 9 months, or a year, and you're back to the drawing board again. This we call the hire, fire, rehire risk, and it is a very real risk that firms encounter several times. Another option is to send a trusted insider, someone who knows your company and knows your product well and in whom you have great confidence. And they'd be an ideal person if they understood the market, they understood the culture, they had been in the market, they had a network, they knew where to go, what resources to tap into, how the tax laws work, and so on and so forth. And the problem there becomes, how long is it going to take them to become effective? And it's not a matter of months, it's usually a matter of quarters and valuable time that can be lost. And that's why using an in-market team can be a useful alternative. Not only does it reduce risk, but it shortens the time to break even, volume, and profit. And not only do you leverage the resources of a team rather than an individual, but you also get to leverage the resources of, in this case, our extended team of accountants, lawyers, marketers, channels, and the like, including people like Bob Graham on the M&A side, who you're going to hear from later. Now, I want to share with you of the several programs that we have, three programs. Aligning with a business partner or channel, using our sales as a service program, and working with us to help you build your operation in North America. Now, the question, which is the best of these programs? The answer is it all depends on your situation, your objectives, your resources, where you are in the scheme of things. And you can start with one of these programs, like building a channel or sales as a service, and use it as a stepping stone to move into a second or third phase of establishing your own in-country operation. Now, here gives an idea on this slide of the advantages of each and where they are suitable. If you have low entry-level capital, but are carrying a product like software with high margin where you can give 30 to perhaps 45% discount, then a regional or national channel partner is going to buy you the leverage of all of their resources, including sales, support, billing, and distribution. They're going to give you national and vertical market coverage from day one, and you get to operate in their slipstream. So they will get you hitting the ground running really quickly. If you have low entry level capital and you want to stay close to your customers and own them, then the sales as a service program can be a great way not only to enter the market, but to test the market to see that you have everything right. And the reason for that is that the investment is low and it's a staged program. We start with generating leads, then converting those leads to sales, then converting those sales to ongoing accounts that keep bringing in revenue. And if at each stage along the way you don't hit the threshold numbers that you deem necessary to continue with the investment, you stop. So it's a great way to manage your risk and a great way to keep your investment in proportion with your goals. And finally, of course, if you've got the critical mass in place and you've got the targeted customer base as well as the capital on hand, and I'll tell you, in our experience, it's very difficult to build your own operation for under $300,000 in capital, because everything just has to go right under that amount. Above that amount, it gives you a buffer, a margin of safety. But with your own operation, you get to not only manage and develop your brand and control it, but you have direct linkage to the customers. And as you're going to learn from our next two presenters, you also get control over that very important job of building your enterprise value. Now, when I talked about some of the advantages of the programs, I want to specifically take a look at sales as a service. Graphically on this slide, you can see the advantages depicted. The black curve here represents the typical cost outlay, cash outlay, and time it takes to build revenue over time. The blue curve represents our experience in terms of cost and revenue buildup with the sales as a service program. There are two advantages. First, with the maximum investment, it is lower with sales as a service, far lower typically than with growing your own. And finally, your time to hit break even, there's a shorter time horizon. So it's a great way to conserve cash. And you always have the option as you grow your revenue over time, you can then begin to take the margin from your sales proceeds to hire people directly to take care of your customers in the market. Lastly, I want to spend 3 slides just talking about a few of the great many aspects of entering the market directly and establishing your own operation. Now, there are a lot of considerations, but I want to review 3 today: legal, accounting, and location. These point out that this is not a do-it-yourself project for beginners. A lot of firms try it and they're able to muddle their way through, but they spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of needless money trying to figure out the system. It is definitely complicated, and in many respects, it can be unforgiving. There are myriad things to know in the legal and regulatory domain, as well as in all of the various jurisdictions in the United States, for example, doing appropriate tax filings and tax returns. And then with 58, 1 million plus metropolitan centers, where do you choose to locate? So to give you a sense of our network of very experienced and exceptional attorneys and accountants, while every company situation is unique and yours is unique too, I'm not giving this as blanket advice, but consider this as general advice that is typical and fits most organizations coming here. A good corporate lawyer, our corporate lawyers are typically going to recommend, of the different ways to form a company and incorporate it, that you go with what is called a C Corp in the United States. Many reasons, 2 of which: number 1, it gives you the most flexibility down the road. Anything that you could consider could happen to you as a company, you can enter into under a C Corp arrangement. You're not restricted from anything. And secondly, quite importantly, when it comes to raising money, VCs, for example, will not look at funding an entity unless it's a share issuing C Corp. Now, when it comes to incorporation, there are 50 states in which you can incorporate in the US, and you can also incorporate federally as well. Our lawyers tend to recommend, if you're going to operate across a broad number of states and have an eye to operate nationally, that you incorporate in the state of Delaware. Why Delaware? It's not the least expensive, but it is business friendly, and it will advantage you in terms of liability protection for unforeseen events down the road. We've got an outstanding tax attorney who deals with software as a service or cloud-based firms to give them tax-advantaged structural status. And to do this for Australia and New Zealand, it really gets down to understanding the tax treaties between the countries. And you may not know it, but you can structure yourself in the United States, incorporate and structure yourself to attribute and recognize all revenue to your home country if you're a SaaS or a cloud-based business. Now, there are some requirements you have to satisfy in doing that. You must have a transfer pricing agreement in place with the subsidiary, operate at arm's length, let them make a number of decisions, draw contracts against the parent organization rather than the subsidiary, and so on. But in doing this, you can attribute all revenue to your home country, and the IRS typically is happy if all you show is a 3% operating profit in the United States and the subsidiary paying tax on that. And finally, in any state you sell in the US, you're going to have to pay taxes and do returns. There are quarterly, semi-annual, and annual filings. You may have to do tax withholding on sales taxes, for example, and income taxes. And if you have payroll, there's any number of different filings you have to do, some federal and always state. and they vary state by state by state. An accountant can make this a very easy matter for you. They can take care of it in a very short period of time and save you a lot of grief, time, and effort. To give you an idea of cost, a C corp and corporation typically runs $3,000 to $5,000. A great tax lawyer to set up tax advantaged status can also do it for you and give you appropriate advice for $3,000 to $5,000. And an accountant can handle your filings and your payroll for typically hundreds of dollars a quarter. And finally, you've seen these slides before when it comes to location. And I'm not going to go through this in detail. These are examples of what it costs to hire a single salesperson or to start a 3-person office. And the point being that no matter which way you go, just with the examples here, there's a 40% differential. If I was to take in other metropolitan centers across the United States and Canada, you'd see that differential come up to 70%. Cost is only one thing to consider. We're looking at location. There are many other factors, but in working with trained professionals who understand the market, understand the factors, can meld those together with what you want to accomplish, you are going to increase your odds of going into things with eyes wide open and making an optimum choice for your company. Now we want to move into the importance of driving corporate value and being able to raise capital. And for that, I got to turn things over to our partner, Bob MacBean.
So thank you, Michael. It's interesting. It's not until you do one of these webinars that you find out your partners actually know something. So thank you for doing that, Michael.
Thank you, Bob.
It was my job today is really to let you know why it's important to have your company diversify in a geographic sense, and I'm going to do that by asking you if you're serious about growth, if you're serious about enterprise value, and serious about getting access to capital, then geographic diversification should be high in your list as a strategic initiative. You may think it's risky, and it is risky. I've done it many times, but well executed, it actually reduces your enterprise risk by diversifying your income stream. It also demonstrates your ability to scale and manage growth in difficult situations, making you a lot more appealing to investors or buyers. So that's a really important reason. If any of those things resonate with you, it's important to diversify geographically. Slide 15, Michael. Now, for people like me in Canada and people like you in Australia, it's also important, if you're ever thinking of getting access to capital or ever thinking of selling out to a VC fund or strategic buyer, you can see on this chart, almost 30% of the buying group or the investment group comes from outside the country. So there's another very good reason to think about coming to the North American market. Slide 16, Michael. Now, as you might expect, there is a lot of money in the U.S. market. It's up from the downturn in 2009. It's sort of leveled off, but there's still, at least in the private equity sector, there's still almost $350 billion placed annually in 2,000 deals. This doesn't include all the VC deals, the angel investment deals, and the strategic buyer deals. So this is just private equity. So there's a lot of money here. Next slide, Michael. In terms of multiples, they have picked up since, again, the downturn in 2009. They've kind of leveled off. And this is all deals. This is total enterprise value / EBITDA. So this isn't the tech sector. Now, Bob Graham in a couple of slides is going to talk to you about what he's seeing on the ground for small, medium-sized businesses in the tech sector. He's going to talk about that. But on my next slide, Michael, 18, these are the stats for the tech sector for the first half of 2013. You can see they're significantly above the average in terms of multiples. So that's a good sign, and I think most of you on the line would say you're in the tech sector. Now, again, if you are raising capital or are thinking of finding a buyer and those sorts of things, I think the key points in this slide is that there is a lot of money around. That's one thing, but there is a lot of competition for money. So if you're serious, you want to pay attention to the 5 points in the bottom right corner of this slide. Very important in terms of packaging what you have to offer. Next slide, Michael. Now, if you've done all that and you've thought about it, then managing the process, that is managing the investment process, managing the M&A process, managing the buyout process, et cetera, is critical. So on point 1, when I'm talking about strategy, I'm not talking about your business strategy. I'm talking about the strategy of managing the buyout process or the investment process, managing that process, managing your liquidity event. If you don't have a strategy in mind, you're going to run into trouble. Third point down, you're always going to want to pick the right buyers or investors. You need to research who you're going after. And again, Bob Graham and I did a deal a while ago. We started out with 3,000 well-chosen. I know that sounds ridiculous, but 3,000 well-chosen prospects. And through self-selection, or we just eliminated them, we narrowed that down to about 300 in 2 weeks. We then narrowed it down through the same process to 30 in another 2 weeks, and then eventually down to 3. But the point is, they were well chosen, and it created a buzz. It created competition, and as you know, competition drives value. Be prepared with the due diligence material. Be prepared long in advance before you start this process, and be honest about the state of your company. If the investor or the buyer senses you're hiding anything, it's all over. So you got to be open and transparent. You got to be prepared. You got to look like you know what you're doing. Next point, you have to anticipate issues. What's actually coming up. Anyways, those are some of the points. Now, if you've got that far, Michael, do you want to go to the next slide, 21? If you've got that far and you want to get a premium to market, whether it's an investor and you don't want to get diluted that much, or it's a buyer and you want to get maximum value, you want to pay attention to, and this is why it's important to pick the right buyer, because you want to pick buyers that have some of these goals. They don't have to have them all, but they're from their perspective, they're looking for economies of scale and scope. They're looking for cross-selling opportunities by doing a deal with you. They're looking for unlocking underutilized assets. It's from their perspective. So finding buyers or investors that have some of these characteristics is going to dramatically change the value of the deal. Last slide, Michael, 22. Now, we at Preston Willis Group have been able to package up some of these value drivers that I talked about into 18 best-of-breed categories, and these are those categories. And we've been able to license some diagnostic software to examine each one of these and how it contributes to the value of your company. Not only what the value of your company is now based on these value drivers, but what the value could be if you did something about these value drivers, if you corrected any discrepancies in those. So the key in managing these value drivers through this proprietary software is looking at the gap. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to, I think actually, before I do that, Michael's going to mention something about these value drivers at the end here, I think, as well. But I'm now going to pass this off to Bob Graham. Thanks very much. Bob?
Hello, everybody. Bob Graham of Wavepoint. Most of you know us because you get our teasers, you're in our database, and some of you I recognize a number of your names. So Wavepoint. So the reason Preston Willis Group, Bob MacBean, et cetera, Glenn Myers, we got together was as we do Wavepoint, you know, sell software companies, et cetera, which I'll get into in a second, we find a lot of the companies are not really prepared for an exit. They're coming because of, well, I turned 65, time to sell the company, or the competition's eating my lunch, or the cloud conversion is going to cost too much money, or et cetera, et cetera. Not ideal reasons for selling. and I often thought, well, a little bit of planning a couple of years ago would have gone a long way to prepare a company for sale. And it isn't just good enough to have a business plan anymore, et cetera, et cetera. You really have to benchmark yourself against your peers. And I live the benchmarking against your peers every day when I negotiate with buyers, because that's exactly what they're looking for. You know, how do these guys compare to their competitors? And so that's what you're going to hear more about today as we go forward. So a little bit on Wavepoint. The ideal partnership we have with PWG is you would take advantage of their service to get prepared and spruce up your company, if you will. And then when it's time to sell, we would step back in and take you to market. So we're a full-service technology M&A firm. We mainly do sell side worldwide. We have 4 clients in Australia. We have 3 or 4 clients in the US. We have 3 or 4 clients in Canada. Our buyers are worldwide, typically American/Europe. We've sold Canadian companies to Australian companies, American companies to European companies, et cetera, et cetera. You're in our worldwide database of 21,000 tech companies, and that's how we find buyers and sellers and match them up, et cetera. So my day is full of talking to people, usually buyers, and frankly negotiating with them. And therefore, we're constantly in touch with current valuations, the positive points about my client that we're trying to sell, the perhaps not so positive points about my client we're trying to sell. And that's, in effect, what we're talking about today. So to end that one, quickly, the better prepared you are for the exit that eventually is going to come sooner or later for most companies, the more likely you are to get a, you know, as we call it, fourth quartile price. Okay. So next slide, please.
It's up there, Bob.
Thank you. So what are the 4 pillars that drive buyers? Well, we get into these all the time. What are they looking for? Obviously, they want a good deal. Most companies, including very large companies, have to do acquisitions to grow the business. They just can't grow fast enough organically. The larger a company becomes, the less nimble they become. They can't keep up with development internally. It's usually too slow, too late, over budget. Therefore, they have to buy, you know, great little or smaller companies. So what are they looking for? What are the 4 pillars? Well, primarily, they're looking for good people, because they always need good people. Now, good people means actually not just good technology people. More importantly, good subject matter expertise within the sector. Number 2, probably the biggest weakness, is a lack of sales and marketing, especially worldwide sales and marketing. And finally, management skills. And then 4th would be good technical skills. They're also looking for good clients. It doesn't necessarily have to be large enterprise. That's kind of good if you've got logos that everybody recognizes, but there's lots of firms that focus on the SMB and even the consumer market. But they're looking for a good client list, ideally worldwide. Evenly distributed revenues from major geographies of the world, recurring revenue from these clients, all on multi-year contracts. They're looking for good technology. Cloud is no longer a trend, Saas, it's mainstream. We get buyers who say, don't even bring me a company if it's not cloud SaaS, because our company has basically said we're only going to buy cloud SaaS going forward. And end all, we have people who say, if it isn't SaaS or cloud, they won't even look at it because they don't want to get into the conversion business. Sorry, I skipped ahead to good technology. And good financials. I mean, you can't ignore the fact, I would say since 2008, in particular, they're just not going to buy a break-even company. If they do, they're not going to pay very much. They're certainly not going to buy a promise of tomorrow. Those days are gone. They're looking for proof in the pudding that you actually can go out there, sell against competition, get customers, get recurring revenue, support your customers, grow your customers, and grow your base. And those are the 4 stools they're looking for. Now, as Bob MacBean, next slide, Michael, please. Yeah, so I'm going to take a very simplistic example here just to keep it simple. and it ties in nicely with what Bob and Michael have said previously. Let's just take a software company with $1 million, and frankly, 1 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million are kind of magical marks in the software industry and the M&A business. But let's take 1 million. The way we do it is we take, and Bob's numbers were pretty good on technology. I've got some other numbers, but they're generally in that sphere. But most of those deals are public companies buying public companies, therefore they have to publish the ratios. Small private buying small private are almost never divulged. So I think what I'm going to share with you now is a little closer to the street price of an under $10 million software company. So I start with 1.5 times revenue. Now the reason for that is obviously we like to sell at 1.5 plus times revenue versus a multiple of EBITDA, because usually the smaller you are, the lower your EBITDA is as a percentage of revenue. But if we take 1.5 times revenue to keep it simple, so you're a $2 million company, we're going to start at $3 million, that's what we're going to get for your company. And then if you've got value enhancers, such as what PWG has shown you, the value drivers, the 18 drivers, I believe it was, your price is going to go up. If you have value detractors, then the 1.5 times 2, 3 is going to go down. I'll give you an example of some of these. So for example, if your revenue per employee, which is a key measurement in any industry, in the software industry, it's moved up to $150,000 US per employee. Now, if you're south of that, that's going to be noted by the buyers. If you're north of that, that's going to be obviously not only noted, but respected by the buyers. Recurring revenue, you can get that from 20% maintenance on an old license model, or of course you can get that from a Saas model, cloud model. And, you know, I talk to people that have it 50, 60, 70% of revenue is recurring. That's something that comes up almost in the first call with a buyer, is what is the percentage of revenue that's recurring? And so that's very important. So revenue per employee, percentage of revenue recurring. Another value enhancer is worldwide footprint of customers. You know, everybody likes to see a map and customers worldwide, not just in Australia, not just in Canada, et cetera, et cetera. Now, some value detractors are no growth, slow growth, break even. Today, that's a tough sell to go out there and say, I got a great customer, but he's didn't grow very much, hasn't got much EBITDA, but boy, it's a compelling case. Those are people today are saying no more and more on that, especially foreign buyers. If your sector is crowded, or if your technology is outdated, you know, there isn't a sector that isn't competitive, and tomorrow it's going to be more competitive. And so just keeping up is difficult in the software industry. But if you've got a cloud model with some new features, better features, more competitive features, you pick out some big clients, it's going to be noted in the marketplace. And back to location. Location is important. It is what we don't, for example, we don't broadcast that our 2 sell-side clients are in Australia because, frankly, there's a bias against a long way away if you're a U.S. buyer. We would bring that out later in the program after an NDA is signed, and they note that it's in Australia, but at that time, hopefully, they're moving along. But geography sometimes is a negative detractor. Again, for small companies. So those are just some examples. There's many more, but those are one that come out. But again, back to if you're better prepared for your exit, which is probably inevitable based on whatever, but sooner or later, large companies buy small companies just to grow, and you want to monetize your hard work and effort, then exiting with a plan like PWG is the way to go. And obviously, I'd play a role at the end of that process in the sales end of it. Okay, and I look forward to questions later in the program as well. Okay. Michael, back to you.
Thanks, Bob. So just to summarize, what we pointed out, that doing it on your own does carry short-term risks. Not that it can't work, but the risk of being able to get the first rep first time out, and the risk of sending an emissary who can get up to speed quickly tend to be difficult to manage. As you heard from both Bob and Bob, the best way to have a happy ending to your own enterprise story is to drive enterprise value. It enables you not only to position yourself to raise capital, but also to improve the sales price. And finally, with the programs that we went through, we can help you a program find a business partner. We can certainly, and in working with Novatech, help establish a sales as a service program to get you started in North America. And whether it's right away or as a phase 2 or phase 3, bring the expertise to play to help you build and establish an operation. And there are other programs and permutations of these that we can certainly help with. And the big question from what you've seen today and in the last 2 webinars is exactly how can we help? And we're very happy to have the conversation to understand your situation and to give our opinion as to where we could help and to provide a proposal for you as to what we think could help get the ball across the goal line. So Brian, back to you. And I'm going to take everybody off mute to be able to take Q&A. Are you online yet, Brian?
I am indeed.
Perfect.
I'm here, Michael. I think we're right on schedule, ladies and gents. We said we talked for about 35 or 40 minutes, so we've got about 20 minutes to take any Q&A that you would like to ask of Bob or Michael before we wrap up. So I'll throw it open to the floor for any questions that people may have.
And the microphones are open, so you can either type in a question on your screen or just speak away into your mic or telephone.
We need a plant here, Michael, to start to prime the pump. Brian, how about you? Have you got any questions? Prime the pump here.
Look, I have a question for Bob Graham. Bob, you mentioned that you obviously have experience both selling Australian companies on their behalf and also overseas companies who are looking to acquire Australian technology. Do you see any change in that or any general trends in that area over the last few years in particular?
No, I would say 2 things. Number one, Australian companies, New Zealand companies, actually Canadian companies, take through 3 of the smaller members of the quote British Commonwealth, actually have an excellent reputation in software technology, hardware technology. It's often remarked upon after a call how complete the documentation is, how well the demo went, how much they know about this sector. So I would say compared to our American cousin, and I have American clients, most of my clients are American, there's no, how would I say it, the Americans aren't ahead 25% when it comes to being prepared to sell their business, and they're not 25% ahead when they come to demoing their great stuff. I would say, as far as that goes, Australian companies are very well positioned with very strong technology. By the way, Brian, just on that I don't actually have people looking right now to buy in Australia. I mean, what I do have is Australian companies, 2 of them on the ASX, small, I don't want to mislead you. They've hired us to buy targets for them to grow because they, worldwide, but primarily in the U.S. because they know valuation goes up if you have a Chicago office and LA office, and you have, 25% of your clients are U.S. clients paying recurring revenue. Yeah.
And do you see, in that regard, particularly with Australian companies, Bob, do you see them looking to sell their business at any point of, let me call it, geographical expansion, or is it a life cycle in terms of just the life cycle of the business and where the owner is at?
Yeah, I would say it's very similar reasons. Actually, one of my Australian clients, one of the partners just turned 67, and his partner is 57, 56, and they decided to go in the business and grow together. So that's a age-related, of which about 25% of my sell side are. The other one is either a board, external board, internal board, deciding to sell the business because the business is in need of selling for whatever reason, usually not a great reason. And then we do get the shareholder disputes. My partner and I aren't getting along. We decide to sell the business. So I kind of hear it all. The ideal time to sell your business, I always say to people, is when you're at the top of the curve. When everything's absolutely great, that's actually the perfect time to sell your business as opposed to buying a yacht. That's the time to sell your business. Don't wait till you're on the downside of the curve and the competition's eating your heels, and you know what I mean. And now you're in a little bit of trouble, and you're not keeping 100% of your clients, so you're losing some. So the ideal time to sell is at the peak or before the peak, not on the other side of the valley.
Okay, understand. Thanks, Bob.
Brian, Robert submitted a comment to you, or to everybody.
I'm just. Is that comment available to everybody? I'm just having a look at it here,
Yes.
Michael.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Robert. That's very interesting. That's Robert Hossery from AmCham, the American Chamber of Commerce here in Sydney. Do we have any other questions, ladies and gents? I think not. Perhaps if you could just go to the next slide, Michael.
Yep.
Okay, I think we said we'd finish on time, and we were a bit ahead of time, ladies and gents. As with our previous two webinars, there is a copy of the PDF available to you. You'll also see some handouts that I think will also be of particular interest: the transferable enterprise value and the M&A survey results that Preston Willis are making available. Given this is the first time we've run this series of webinars, we'd be very interested in your feedback as to the nature of the content and the structure of the webinars, because this is something that we're obviously looking to replicate over time. And we also have, I guess, the ability to have a discussion with you about what your needs might be. As I might have mentioned, those of you who we have met, we're doing this type of work into Australia on behalf of a number of Irish and New Zealand companies, and with some strong interest from some UK and US and Canadian software companies as well entering the Australian-New Zealand market. And what we're finding in our work in that regard is essentially how we can then transfer those learnings into helping Australian and New Zealand companies actually go offshore, in particular to North America. And that's something we're working on with Glenn and Michael over the next few weeks and months. So we'd be very happy to see how we could help in that regard. The key issue we find with all of our inbound clients who are looking to expand into ANZ, it really is a matter of two key issues that our CEOs worry about: are mitigating risk and how can I get to the point of being cash flow positive in the quickest time available. So they're two of the key drivers that we're looking at as we look to how we can help Australian and New Zealand software companies go offshore. Having said that, thank you very much for your time,
Brian?
ladies and gents.
Brian?
Yes, Michael?
Yes, Mike, just one thing I would draw everyone's attention to. If they recall that Bob MacBean showed a slide with 18 value drivers and software that we use to help a company assess where it stands relative to others in its industry, and some areas that it may want to pay attention to get an assessment of. And typically we charge $750 for that. It's online in a phone consultation, but to everyone who's been on any of these seminars, Brian, we're making that available free of charge, and we'll put it on the website. And I would encourage anyone, there's obviously no obligation, it's well worth gaining some insight into where you happen to stand relative to other enterprises in North America.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you for that. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for taking the time to attend.
Brian?
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's a question. I think there's a question there from Robert.
Okay.
Ossery.
Okay. I think a question here from more statement, Robert, is it? Don't underestimate the compliance with employment regulations in the different states.
Got it. Good point. Good point. I didn't see a second point. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, gents and ladies. Thanks for your time.